News 6 broke the story last year. 3 residents of the Villages arrested for allegedly voting twice in the 2020 election. Authorities first learned about those voter fraud cases from an anonymous tipster.
Tonight, we reveal how that very same tipster alerted state officials to hundreds of other potential voter fraud cases. As News 6 discovered, few have been criminally prosecuted so far. News 6 investigator Mike DeForest breaking some new developments in this story for you tonight. Mike, you've told us about this anonymous tipster before.
Matt, he goes by the pseudonym Totes Legit Votes, as in totally legitimate. Those 3 voters in the Villages were arrested because of information uncovered by Totes Legit. The anonymous tipster has identified many others who may have also illegally voted twice, but more than a year after he began warning the state about it, relatively few have been held accountable. Last year, someone using the pseudonym Totes Legit Votes, who describes himself as a citizen election integrity analyst, was quite busy on his computer. Totes Legit had obtained Florida's voter rolls, which anyone can request, and compared them to voter rolls he got from other states, like this one from New York. By examining the 2 spreadsheets, Totes Legit identified people who may have cast a ballot in Florida while also casting a second ballot in another state. If accurate, that's a potential felony. Totes Legit emailed his findings to Florida's Secretary of State, who oversees elections. By the end of last year, the tipster had identified dozens and dozens of Floridians who may have voted twice in the last general election, 282. But as News 6 has learned, relatively few have been charged with crimes so far. Here in Florida, these 3 residents of the Villages were prosecuted as a result of the tips from Totes Legit. And a few have been prosecuted outside the state, including these voters in Idaho and Rhode Island who allegedly cast ballots there after first voting in Florida. But most of the information uncovered by Totes Legit has not yet resulted in criminal charges.
If evidence is found of a crime, you will be held accountable.
Florida's Secretary of State, Cord Byrd, is not telling us how his office addressed those anonymous tips, but News 6 has uncovered some answers. After Totes Legit emailed tips to the Secretary of State in Tallahassee last year, that office forwarded them to county-level elections officials throughout the state. As News 6 has learned, each supervisor of elections handled the tips differently. When Sumter County Supervisor of Elections Bill Keene received the tips, records show his staff investigated and then sent them to State Attorney Bill Gladson, who later filed felony charges against Joan Halstead, Jay Ketzik, and John Ryder. Halstead and Ketzik have since admitted to the crimes. Ryder is still awaiting trial and has pleaded not guilty. Other election supervisors tell News 6 they also notified their local prosecutors but never received an update. If an election supervisor determined a voter cast their first ballot in Florida legally and then cast a second illegal ballot in another state, the tips were often forwarded to those other states.
There are investigations ongoing into people that have voted in 2 different jurisdictions, and I imagine you are going to see prosecutions on that.
Governor Ron DeSantis recently hinted that the state's newly created election police unit may get involved. Just last week, after News 6 began asking questions, the Secretary of State's office sent election supervisors another batch of tips from Totes Legit, instructing them to review the information and then report back to that new Office of Election Crimes and Security for criminal investigations.
Many of the potential double voters identified by Totes Legit are elderly, in their 70s, 80s, and even 90s. In some cases, prosecutors say they declined to file criminal charges if the voter appeared to have some memory problems and did not intend to break the law. In at least a few cases, election officials found data errors, meaning no crime occurred. Matt and Lisa.
So, Mike, what does Totes Legit, which is a strange name to say on TV, think about all of this?
To be clear, I've never actually spoken to him by phone. We've only exchanged some emails. But Totes Legit tells me he's not trying to get anyone in trouble. Instead, he says he's just trying to point out that voter fraud does occur more than some may realize, and he does not believe that the government can prevent all of it from happening.